All right. Despite the odds that you see here on the screen, I've eliminated Dak Prescott from MVP contention. As you can see, Dak still has the third best odds behind Brock Purdy and Lamar Jackson. But I did a little historical study going back to 2000. I just didn't have time to keep going back and back and back. Maybe somebody could find it. But MVPs don't lose in December by 3 touchdowns. It just doesn't happen. Going back to 2000, it hasn't happened. That's what happened to Dak against the Buffalo Bills this week. They got blown out 31-10. And honestly, the 10 was generous. Was a 31-3 game. But sometimes quarterbacks lose in December, but they don't lose by 21. MVPs, excuse me, don't lose by 21. There have only been 2 MVPs since the year 2000 that have even lost the game by 14 points in December. One was the 09 Colts. They lost by 14 points on December 27th. They were 14-0 when they lost. They then lost again the next week, but Peyton didn't play that game. 03, December 21st, the Colts lost by 14. They'd go on to have a 12-4 year that year, and Peyton would split the award with the Titans quarterback Steve McNair. That's it. I mean, you want to find guys that even lost in December and won the MVP. Mahomes last year lost by 3 in December. The year before, Mahomes lost 2 games by a combined total of 8 points. The year before, 17, Brady lost a game by 7 points. Matt Ryan in 2016 lost a game by 1 point. Cam Newton in 2015 lost on December 27th by 7 points. It was their first loss of the year. They were 14-1 after that game. Rodgers lost by 8. Manning lost by 7. Rodgers in 2012 on December 7th lost by 13. It's over a decade since a guy even lost a game by 2 scores. So it doesn't happen. To me, Dak could still go 13-4, but he's got to be out. You don't get your ass kicked in December like that and win the MVP. Now, some people could argue, look, he's still got a path in front of him. I think this is why his odds are still where they are, that and being the Cowboys quarterback, plus 700. Okay. Third best odds. Why? Well, he still has the Dolphins and the Lions in front of him. And so I think there are still some voters out there that would say, no, I'd vote, Dak can still go 13-4. He can still win the division. He can have some huge games still with Miami and Detroit. This week he might have a huge game against Miami, be a big bounce back and a win. I'm sorry. You just can't get beat by multiple scores, by 3 scores in mid-December and be the most valuable player in the NFL. It doesn't. Your eye test tells you it doesn't happen. Intuition tells you it shouldn't happen. And the historicals tell you it don't happen. Now, you would argue this year is a unique year. It's just a weird year because Mahomes isn't in the mix. Burrow's not around. Like all these guys that you would have thought at the beginning of the year. And then Lamar comes sauntering in. And the reason Lamar has the second best odds is because he plays Brock head-to-head, and they still play Miami. So Lamar Jackson can go 14-3 with wins over the Niners and the Dolphins at the end of the year. So Lamar Jackson, that's legitimate. I know people are going to look at the stats and go, wait a second, Brock's got 29 touchdowns. The Dak's people will say this too. Dak has almost Brock's numbers, 28 touchdowns, 7 picks. Brock leads the league, 29 touchdowns, 7 picks. You're talking to somebody who thinks Brock's a legitimate. If you're new here, hi, I'm Guy. I think Brock's a legitimate candidate. I think McCaffrey should be a legitimate candidate. And we're sponsored by Tito's Handmade Vodka. But, I think there's going to be people that still argue for Dak. The Josh Allen. Josh Allen is what, 3rd in the NFL in touchdowns. People are going to say, how could you? He threw for like 95 yards in that win over the Cowboys. His best record this year is 11-6. That's not a very high ceiling. And they could beat Miami at the end of the year. They could win out. They could win their division. So he could get some late momentum, say, Lamar beats Purdy, but then Lamar loses. But I even though he's pretty high on this list, I don't think he's got a great shot. I think it's more likely, even though the odds don't reflect this and history doesn't reflect this, I think it's more likely that McCaffrey over Josh Allen, because he's just been so special that if the Niners were to beat the Ravens this week, but Brock isn't great, Lamar loses, so you kind of got to move him out. But McCaffrey plays well. Like, I think there is a pretty reasonable scenario where Christian goes and wins the MVP this year. But if you beat the Ravens on Monday, then I think you probably eliminate Lamar, and then the Niners it's going to be one of, I think then it's got to be one of those two guys. But, maybe not everybody agrees with me, and some people are going to keep Dak around because statistically you're going to look up and he could still lead the league in touchdown passes, and he could have 2 huge wins here down the stretch. For me, I think you got to take Dak out because that December loss. But I don't know if the voters are going to do that. Just because at the end of the year you could sit back and see like a pretty solid resume, and he could sway some votes here the last 2 weeks. Well, not the last. I mean, they got 3 weeks left, but with 2 big games. But for me, he's got to be gone. Brian, the Christmas game versus the Ravens will likely decide the MVP. I think that's true. I think Brock Purdy is a legitimate MVP, just to restate the case. I'm not as convinced as some that it's going to happen. John and I were talking about this the other day. When does it get announced? He said he thought it was right before the Super Bowl, like the week before at the NFL honors. And that actually sounds right to me. Hi, I'm Steve. I'm a GFF-aholic. GFF grades Dak as not the guy. I mean, I've got the that's true. GFF does. I've got the PFF grades in front of me is what I'm trying to say. And number 1 passer, PFF grades. Here's the order: Tua, Dak, Josh Allen, Mahomes, Cousins, Stafford, Herbert, Goff, Purdy. Whatever. Purdy right now leads in touchdowns. Purdy right now second in yards to Tua with almost a yard and a half more per attempt than Tua. But Snoopy says Purdy winning the MVP would be so terrible for this league and prove it's nothing but a quarterback award. I mean, it is nothing but a quarterback award. I don't think it'd be terrible for the league. It'd be a positive thing for the league. They're always looking for Brady's out. You're just looking for superstar quarterbacks, easy guys to sell. He's been that. So, I don't think it'd be bad for the league, but it would continue to. Now, again, the guy's going to lead the league in touchdowns potentially on the number 1 team. So, I wouldn't quite devolve into it's nothing but a quarterback award. The history tells us it's nothing but a quarterback award. Now, you might be arguing Christian McCaffrey's just the best flat-out player in the NFL, and that's a good argument. Luke the Don says Christmas game won't decide it if Tyreek gets 2,000 and Purdy has a down game against Lamar. I have a really hard time seeing Tyreek win the MVP, but maybe I'm missing that boat. I mean, you watch them and it's clear that he changes them and he could get to 2,000 yards. I just think it's going to be hard for him to get to 2,000, but maybe Mike McDaniel goes for it. They're going to play a game at the end of the year against Buffalo that they're going to have to win. So maybe I shouldn't discount Tyreek, but I just don't see it. I don't see Tyreek passing McCaffrey unless the Niners fall back. Andres, considering how much Purdy's getting paid, he is the MVP undoubtedly. So a few people have made this comment to me. I think it's a clever comment. I'd not thought about it until somebody said it here a week or 2 ago. And I said, oh, that's a good comment. Like, that's a good thought. I don't actually think, just to be clear, I don't think how much you make should factor into the most valuable player award. I don't think it does. I don't think anybody thinks about it truly. And I wouldn't think about it if I were voting. Like, if let's say 2 guys are equal and you're trying to break the tie and one of them makes 50 million and one of them makes 1 million, I would not break the tie on that. I understand the logic. I get it. Valuable, money, value. But I don't think anybody actually thinks about the MVP that way. It's a clever outside the box way to think about it, but I don't think you should actually then put that thought into action and have it affect your MVP vote. Guy, what's your take on Kittle campaigning for McCaffrey as MVP, but not Brock, and Fred campaigning hard for Brock as MVP and not CMC? Could this split the team? I don't care. And it wouldn't surprise me if the 2 of them got together and agreed, I'm going to do the one for the one guy and you're going to do the one for the other guy. So no is the real answer to could it split the team. He's a second-year player that makes 800,000. It's clearly factored in. That's the main part of the story. I don't think it is clearly. I don't think anyone's going to factor that. I don't think many people will factor it in for MVP. I don't think they should. I would not. It's 100% Seabass part of the story of Brock Purdy. There is no question about it. But I wouldn't. To me, in a roundabout way, it's like lowering the bar. It's the reason the Coach of the Year vote is always bizarre. It's always like we thought you were going to suck, and then with Brock, give him the MVP if he's the most valuable player, if he's the best quarterback, if he's the most valuable player. Like, give him the MVP on that merit. Don't make it about, well, boy, you weren't supposed to be any good. And so your bar is way down here. And relative to your bar, you were here. And because of that, you're the MVP. That's what you're doing when you make it about the money. You're saying, we lower the bar for you, and that makes you more valuable. And I wouldn't do it. Like, I don't think it's a real I think it's an interesting conversation, but I don't think it's real when it comes to the MVP, and I would not consider it, and I think it's the wrong thing to consider. I don't think a player's salary should be factored into. Most valuable player doesn't actually mean cap value. It means on the game kicks off, everybody's worth the same amount of money once the game kicks off. Anybody can make the game-winning play, and anybody can be the GOAT. Anybody can be the GOAT, and anybody can be the GOAT. Like what it used to mean, choker and the greatest of all time. Anything can happen. Your salary is irrelevant once the game starts. And that's where the MVP is won and lost. Brady clicked like on an MVP Purdy vid. Well, he is a Niner fan, so it could be something like that. Michael says, I think the pay is why people have a hard time admitting how good Brock is. I don't think it'll bleed into MVP voting. I've said this a few weeks ago. I came to this realization. I'll say it again. I think it's less about where he was drafted and more about the way he looks on the field. The eye test, the physicality, the size, the arm strength. Now, we could debate his arm strength, but what you can't say is that, oh, it looks like Josh Allen, like that explosive arm, an explosive runner. I'm not arguing against him. The point I'm making, and I've been making this for a few weeks, 262, where he was drafted, it's less about that. It is less about where he was drafted, and it's more about easy eye test. And if you don't believe me, think about Tua. Tua was drafted 5th. He's up there in a bunch of offensive categories. Do you think if Tua was 6'4" with a rocket arm, he'd have a better chance of winning the MVP with the same exact numbers? I do. Do you think if Josh Allen, Mahomes, those guys were third rounders, would Mahomes still win the MVPs that he'd won if he was a third round pick? Hell yeah. I'm telling you, I think 262, it's insane. It's insane, the story. It's one of the craziest stories we've ever seen in sports, him being drafted that low and being this player. But I actually think when it comes to how much we think it hurts him, we have overcorrected. And it's less about where he was drafted, and it's more about, I guarantee if we sat down with these people who are voting, and some guy is sitting there going like, Lamar, Josh Allen, Lamar and Brock's a great example of eye test. Lamar's numbers are not up there. But it's not even a flaw eye test. When you watch Lamar, you go, yeah, I watched him last week. Like, yeah, that's an MVP candidate. I'm telling you, it's more about that than it is about where he was drafted at this point. The story is 100% about where he was drafted, but the perceived bias or whatever, the reason people are slow to accept, it's because he hasn't been around that long. And it's, if he looked like Trevor Lawrence, then it'd be a different story. If you look like Mahomes, it'd be a different story. Story matters. Purdy's story is amazing. It's on par with Kurt Warner. If he keeps us up for a few more games, you'll have to give it to him. I think so too. He might lead the league in touchdowns. Just blind resume that. Lead the league in touchdowns on the number 1 seed. If he has beaten the Ravens, if he beat Dak, if he beat Hurts, if he beat Lamar head to head. Like, you don't even say the play, don't even say anything about the guy. You're like, yeah, it's probably the MVP. Did you see Alex Smith getting pissed at Perkins, Clark, and RG3? No, but I want to see that. Somebody share that with me. MVP comes down to who looks the best the last 2 weeks of the season, yeah. Classic Dak will disappoint his team and fans at the end of the year like he always does. This is Purdy's for the taking. I think he's going to play well this week against Miami, but we'll see. It'll be a big one. All right. That's just a quickie. Actually, sometimes I say it's quick and then it's 45 minutes, but that's an actual quickie. Got to roll. Maybe I'll see why Perk was unhinged at the end of that conversation. hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Appreciate that. Help the algorithm out. That makes you a sponsor of the show when you do that. So thank you very much. And we'll be talking about it more later today on the old channel. Thanks, everybody.